Welcome to Open Mic with Groove Kitty. Our aim is to have authentic, engaging conversations with interesting people. This podcast is for you, so please share, like, follow, and subscribe. When you do, it increases our exposure on each platform, which in turn helps to promote our guests. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. Now, without further ado, on to our show.
If life is but a dream that quickly fades away, and I will do the best I can to cherish every day. If time is but a stream that carries us along, then I will use my time to love, and I will sing my song.
So, Bruce and Lorna,
Yes.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce and Lorna Roberts, of course, very well known here in the Charleston area in the music scene. Why don't we start really quick with a brief intro, just so people who don't know you can hear a little bit about you.
Okay. Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
Whichever one of you wants to go first.
We
Be brave.
flip, right? Flip a coin. Or...
Okay. Bruce Roberts, lived in Charleston my whole life and have been involved in music, electronics, radio, all that, hot rods, all that kind of stuff.
Ooh,
So,
we need to talk about that. There's something special in the garage for you to see.
okay.
Can you?
I want to hear about it. So there's my summary.
Awesome. And Lorna?
Singer-songwriter. Went to Nashville for a while and tried to write and kind of hone my craft, and got my little heart broken more than once. And I've also been a public school teacher. I've taught in the gifted and talented program, taught in regular classrooms. I've taught elementary music. I've taught middle school music. Then I opened up a private music studio and taught piano, guitar, ukulele, voice, and helped kids with auditions when they're trying to get into a School of the Arts kind of program. I've gotten to do some really cool things because of being a musician. I, for a while, was a friend of Robert Ivy, who had the ballet company, and went to Russia when it was still the USSR, which was fascinating, and to Denmark, and played at the World's Fair in New Orleans. And so wrote a 15-minute song for Bob that he choreographed, and we did that. And so I've had a lot of really good experiences from being a musician. And
It's interesting to watch you as you recant sort of it. And I can see you going back. Like I can see your mind opening up and the joy that comes.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very evident. And I think that was one of the real interesting things when I met you for the first time. And I should say that I met you through Alan, of course,
Right.
who I really kind of want to start with how you guys know each other, because Alan just can't stop talking about you. And from the day I've known Alan, and which has been a long time now.
Well, I've actually known Alan longer than I've known Lorna.
Yeah, so I want to hear this. Like, tell me about the inception of how you three sort of all came together.
Go.
Well, I met Alan at Seacoast Church playing in the band. And we, most of the time, didn't play on stage at the same time, but we'd be at rehearsals together sometimes. And we just became good friends, sharing techniques. I'd watch him and like, oh, I need to do 5-string bass more, and things like that. And
So that's what Bruce says. My perspective is I went to Seacoast and I was really blown away by the musicianship, which wasn't a distraction to the worship. It was just like, huh. And, growing up in the Lutheran church, I kind of had a problem with that. I was like, that guy's so good playing the bass, but he's going to hell, But then you read in the Psalms how they, basically everything you can get your hands on, pound on it, praise the Lord. So I got over that. But watching you play it's like you're trying to figure out, okay, so what kind of guy is really gonna go this path, And then I saw you and Fred and Jan and everything, and just the two of you are examples of humility and joy. So Bruce is, when I met you, you were still in radio and TV, and everybody knew you, and your technical expertise is still legendary. But you're so humble. I don't know how many times I've, not meaning to embarrass you, just by the way like I get on my hands and knees and approach you and that sort of thing. I know you don't like that, but
Well, I'm out of dollars for compliments.
We take credit here.
But Bruce was the first guy that I saw, first musician that I saw that was worldly good and applying that to an area I had no idea. It's like I had no idea this was happening. So that's why you've always been you've always been a forerunner, a mentor.
I can really easily explain why I play the way I do. I'm not good enough to be real fancy, but I have a good sense of timing. And I believe in, keeping the groove. And in most studio recordings, you don't have to be fancy. You just have to do what's best for the song.
Well, I think there's such a really interesting and, in my opinion, super important point. And we talk about this a lot with friends of mine in music. It's really, I think, understanding what you're good at and exploiting that. And we had a conversation on the phone the other day. We talked about imposter syndrome.
Right, yeah.
And I think we all have suffered from that in one way or another. And every musician does. There's a great, I don't know if you guys have seen it. I think it's on Netflix. There's a documentary about the '68 comeback show for Elvis. Do you remember that when he did the comeback show?
Yeah.
And you're going through this story and you realize here, Elvis, the king, right? And in '68, he was scared to death to even go on stage anymore. I mean, he felt imposter syndrome. I don't belong here. Right. He went out and he missed the cue for the first song, and then he couldn't remember. It was really it's an amazing thing to see, right?
Right.
And it brings back to sort of making a wide path to get to that original point of you don't need to be necessarily the most technically sound musician. And I think a lot of people look at it and say, well, I'm not a great, I'm not a great guitar player. I'm not a great singer. What am I good at? I'm good at entertaining. Okay, so that's where I need to put the focus. You don't need to be a lightning fast guitar player, because I certainly am not, and I'm not disparaging anyone that is, because there are some magnificent musicians out there. So I find magnificent musicians to put around me.
Well, someone once told me the space between the notes is just as important as the notes. If not more important.
I agree.
So to let songs breathe is kind of what we love to
Well,
go
you kind of
for,
think of like the Bill Wyman bass theory, right, with the Rolling Stones was very much a minimalist in what he played, and that was perfect for what they did, right? I find that really fascinating, and it's interesting for someone of your experience and accolades to hear that, because again, that helps me to minimize the imposter syndrome that we talked about. Yeah.
And when we're producing a song, whoever it is, it's all about what I play to support the lyric. I don't want to step over lyrics. We don't want fills stepping on lyrics. The lyrics have to shine, and then there's places for other things to shine. Everything has its place.
Well, as a singer-songwriter, I'm constantly telling Bruce, it's like, okay, these lyrics are very important to me. I want people to hear them, so no extraneous stuff, because I love being a storyteller. And probably that comes a little bit from that Nashville experience that I had, where I just heard amazing, well-crafted songs. And so that's kind of one of the things that I like to shoot for as well. And Bruce is wonderful at that.
Do you think that, because I've obviously listened to a bunch of your songs, and I love them. In fact, I've said to you, I'd love to incorporate some of these into my solo stuff, because I think they're so beautiful. And we were listening to your song Home this morning before you came. And there is such an element of great storytelling there, and you feel that, right?
Right.
Do you think that in today's music we're seeing less storytelling, or is it just sort of it's happening, but there's so much other stuff going on too? It's just part of the landscape now.
Well, I think it depends on the genre of music. I mean, it's when you're doing a certain, if you're doing a song and the main goal is for people to dance and to maybe feel good or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
then the lyrics are going to probably showcase that, as opposed to a song that you want people to really listen to the lyrics because you have a message that
Right.
you're trying to get out there. I mean, in Nashville, I was told over and over and over again, you got to make them feel something, no matter what. And so I think that's one of the things I try to do when I write. A lot of the time, not always.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's just if it's got a good groove, it can just be a happy little song.
Yeah.
And there's tricks you can do to make people want to sing along with you, and so I mean, it's just a tool in the toolbox. You just
I think it's a great way of looking at it.
yeah.
Yeah, because I think for me, I have this debate with a lot of people about music. I have this, and art in general, I feel the same way. There's no bad music. There's no
Right.
bad art. It's just what is preferable to you. And sometimes it's just in that moment,
Exactly.
right? To your point, sometimes I just want to, sometimes I wax poetic and get on my soapbox about entertainment content in general.
Right.
If I see one more remake of a movie that was made 40 years ago, or one more ... 3 and ... 4.
Right.
Be creative, do something different. But you know what? There are times I'm sitting on the couch and I'm just kind of tired and I want to watch something like that too. So I think there's a place for everything.
I agree.
Music, the same thing. Sometimes I just want to get up and dance, and sometimes I do want to feel. I want to hear something really deep and melodic and that evokes emotion. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting perspective. And so for you, you started really young. Like 6 years old is when you first started singing.
I did, and I was singing before that, but I had my first solo in church of Away in a Manger, third verse, walking down the procession on the way at the local Christmas Eve pageant, and I've been singing ever since. It comes naturally, though. I'm from a very musical family.
Okay. Tell me about that.
My grandmother sang on the radio
No.
for gospel music and that sort of thing, and she was quite extraordinary, a woman who was really ahead of her time. I mean, she got divorced when you didn't do those things, and she lived life full on, and I kind of think I'm like her in that respect, but music runs on both sides of my family.
Your parents musical as well?
Yes, and love to dance. My mom and my dad would do the jitterbug, and they would do all the fancy moves, the flipping over. My mom, of course, would be the one that would flip, not my dad.
She's like 85 pounds.
Well,
so-
right now, yes, she's a small little
Easy to flip, right?
Easy to
power of dynamite, but yeah.
And so now you have brothers and sisters as well?
I have a brother who's
Is he also musical?
he plays banjo,
Oh, I love
and he
It's like classical jazz
and
banjo.
jazz. I mean,
Very
he's
interesting.
yes, but he also toured with the bluegrass band in Texas, and
So really early, you basically, you were born into music.
I kind of was.
And
yeah.
so it touched you right from and got its
Oh,
hooks
yeah.
into you from the beginning.
One
Absolutely.
cool story is she told me that when she was little and started learning piano, her mother would say, "I'll do the dishes while you play the piano." So
to get me to practice.
instead of her doing the dishes, and that's good encouragement. I think.
Well, except that I would start playing what I was playing, and then I'm ADD. I'll just put that out there, and so I'm shifting all the time, and I would start out playing what was written on the page, and before you know it, I was making up a song, a little melody that kind of went with that little part, and And so I love playing by ear. I can read music, especially charts, but I get that's not my forte to write. To read
Yeah.
classical music with all those notes, it's a little scary.
Well, Paul McCartney doesn't read
That's
music
right.
to this day, right?
Right.
He's literally written symphonic pieces
Yes.
and just described what he wants, sounds what he wants, from
Right.
the ear what he wants.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting point that you say that about sort of going rogue, right, while you're playing.
Right.
I've met a lot of people, and you probably have too, especially when you get to be adult age and people ask you, you play music or you're a musician. Oh yeah, I took piano lessons when I was a kid, but I really hated it, and I doing the scales and book one, and it just bored me.
Right.
And I think more people get turned away from music because that expression isn't allowed, let's say, or
Right.
encouraged, right? And when I was a kid, I was similar. I didn't have a musical family, but they liked music and encouraged it. So there was always dancing, there was always music in the house.
Right.
And I first learned music on. I wanted to play drums as a kid. Making loud noises was the greatest thing in the world. And so my parents bought me a drum kit, and it was just go wild, do whatever you want, and they never discouraged that.
That's awesome.
And so music to me meant expression. It didn't mean rigid rules.
Right.
And I think you're sort of describing something similar. And I'd love to hear your take, both of your takes on that in terms of, in teaching kids today is a really fine line because of course at some point we need to learn something, but
Yes.
the creative part of it, we don't want to squash that. And
Right.
particularly your work with children, right?
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my main job these days is working with engaging creative minds, ECM, and that's a great program. I love that program so much. Organization. They send people into classrooms to teach students how to do what they do. And in my case, I'm a songwriter and a creative person. And I go in as an artist in residence, and over the course of a week, just 5 days, we write a song based on what they're studying about.
And then perform it.
And then perform it on the 5th day. And I've worked with first graders, I've worked with middle school kids, and it's work I'm really passionate about because I used to be a teacher in the first place. And it's kind of like all the stars aligned in this job. I created it sort of to do all the things that I love to do. And I talk a lot about creativity when I'm in there and how not everything has just one right answer. That's so important to me that kids understand that as well as the music stuff. But I'm sneaking little things in the whole time that I'm there about being creative and learning to think for yourself. And then I also do cooperative learning while we're in there because I'm writing a song with the entire class at the same time. And so we have to collectively pick out the most important things, which is, as a teacher, that was called main idea. You want kids to be able to know the main idea of what you're learning about. And so I'm able to check out off a lot of the boxes by doing this songwriting project, and the kids are having fun.
Yeah.
And because we inject rhythm, then the things that I want them to learn about, because they've got that rhythm there, oh, honey, that definitely makes it more memorable.
Well,
for
it's the
them.
schoolhouse rock theory.
It
right?
is the
When we were
schoolhouse
kids,
rock.
anybody who's over, maybe 40 years old, maybe knows what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
And that was, I don't know what the inception of that program was, obviously, but it was on television and on the Saturday morning cartoons.
Yeah.
And you learned about how Congress worked, and you learned about energy, and you learned about all these things. We can still sing those songs to this
Absolutely.
day.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really magical about learning through music. And then to your point, all those really other great life skills that you're
Right.
teaching,
Yes.
working in a group, main idea, ebb and
Creating-
flow, give and take,
Yes.
right? All of these things, and even just sort of opening up to the creative process, I think requires a real sort of softening of the mind, I think,
Yeah.
letting boundaries down, being vulnerable.
Right. And so when on the very first day, which is usually a Monday, one of the first things I say is we're going to create a creative safe space
Mm.
where all ideas are welcome.
Mm-hmm.
And that that is something that by the last day, I mean, I can almost see a transformation in some classes. Some classes, classrooms, I mean, that's just an automatic thing. They already have a creative safe space.
Got it.
But I've also been in classrooms where kids who academically don't make the A's or even the B's in the class, they kind of open up because they know that whatever ideas they come up with, like when we're looking for words that rhyme, for example, if they come up with a silly answer, I'm not going to say, no, that's
Right.
not right. You know, it's like, that's part of the fun of this. Like, nope, next, next. And we keep it moving.
Yeah.
And it's fun and it's fast and we have a major goal of being able to perform a song by Friday. And we only have 45 minutes a day
I was going to say how long? Yeah,
Per
45
class,
minutes a
yeah.
per
day.
class.
Got
Yeah,
multiple classes going on.
right.
every
I'm
day.
going to all the fourth grade classes in the building. Like, so I'll have 4 and 5 classes that I'm working with every day. And we're also coming up with our own verses. I write the chorus before I get there.
Okay.
I have a teacher's meeting with them ahead of time. And I know what the standards are. I know what they have trouble with remembering. I write all that stuff down so I can be sure that we hit those areas. And then and do the chorus ahead of time usually, so I don't have to be thinking about that. And then come in, and the first day we just brainstorm, what are the important facts? What do we want people to know about rocks or minerals or
So you kind of go in with a preconceived topic.
yeah. I research it ahead of
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
I've learned so much about so much.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. But
So there are guardrails sort of to keep them in a direction, but
Right.
beyond that, then
Yep.
where can their expression
yeah.
take you through that process?
Yeah. And
One
you-
thing, I'm sorry, one
No,
thing
go-
that you told me early on was have low expectations.
Yes.
And that's been very, very helpful to me. How do you communicate that to kids where normally with kids you're saying you can do anything, you know, and you can be great, you can be wonderful. How do you approach that concept with them?
Well, there's, like Scott was saying, there are guardrails, and I have specific things that I know in my head we're going to do. So they can be open and very creative and think outside the box, and at the same time, we have a job to do. And so, within the parameters of what we're trying to do. I mean, we even basically what I try to do is create couplets, because I've found through working with this system for a while that is doable. So we'll count the syllables, we talk about syllables, we clap, we snap, we do all the things, and we also talk about rhyming words, and then we'll say, okay, if we're talking about rocks, then we probably don't need to put this part in. That's very interesting, or because they'll raise those little hands, and boy, they got all kind of ideas about everything.
So you figured out how to do it organically. They get that, but you don't have to like spell that out. You just, the way you do that with
Right.
them, they understand.
It's a process. Creativity is such a process. And with my own songwriting and with co-writing with people, including some professionals who I find to be so playful. I love writing with some professionals that I've met in Nashville, other places too, because they I've had some great experience. I've also had some really terrible experiences trying to co-write in Nashville, only because um, some people, I'm gonna say, my my opinion is they may be a little bit defensive and maybe unsure of themselves or wanting to get the last word in or whatever. Um, and they're not quite so playful. They just believe in their ideas, and my ideas are
Yeah,
better
there's
than
got to
your
be a
ideas.
give and take.
But yeah,
You know.
the best experience as far as co-writing is when you can play together. It's like, hey, how about this? Oh, that's cool. Oh, how about this?
And do you think
So-
some of that maybe kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier about hard for someone to be maybe vulnerable or maybe a little lack of confidence in some
Oh
ways?
yeah, right. And
I
that
think it-
imposter syndrome. I mean, it can happen even when you're a professional.
Yeah.
I think.
Because I think it would be really hard. I look at Alan's known me long enough to know that I'm very into sort of connectivity of all things,
Right.
nature, people, energies, all this stuff. And I look at relationships, whether it's a marital relationship, a bandmate relationship, a co-writing relationship, are all very similar. And that it ultimately, I think, to be successful requires a big level of
Oh,
vulnerability.
absolutely.
Right? And if you're gonna, sit there and write with someone, you're gonna hit some awful things, and you're gonna really have some boners, for lack of a better word. You come up with a really bad note or a bad idea,
Yeah.
and you have to feel comfortable with that person
Right.
to do that. So the playfulness aspect that you
Yeah.
talk about, I think it would have to be. You really have to trust somebody to write with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why I always, when I'm in a classroom situation, that's one of the very first things I say is we're going to make a creative safe space. And then we talk about what that means and what that is, and that everybody's ideas will be welcome. We're going to do this together. And that's the way that we're going to be able to write a song in 4 days or 3 days, which
Yeah.
is basically about the time that we have. So, because the last day we're performing it. So we have to line all the kids up, which can be no small feat.
Each class, by the way.
Each class, I know
Yeah.
it's going like that.
Like herding
you
cats, right?
Sure, exactly. Yeah, and then somebody's pushing somebody, and then, it's like the little bunny ears and the...
Rocco
Hey,
heard us talk about cats, I
Rocco.
think.
Hello, my darling.
Well, I think too, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. In terms of co-writing, everyone has a different process too.
True.
So that it's trying to figure out how someone else sort of works and what their process is like.
Right.
You have to sort of, again, just like a relationship, you go on those first few dates and you kind of have to figure out, how that person works and what they're sort of made of, and then find a place to fit comfortably with that. Yeah.
That's true. And when you're open to the whole process, I've learned so much from writing with other people because it's always really interesting to me how other people go about it. It's like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know that. And it's also sometimes validating when people do sort of the same things I do. Like a lot of times I don't write with an instrument.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, like, what
Right.
do you have a kind of a particular process you follow, or is it sort of different all the time, or
It depends on the song for me.
do you just like wake up and something's in your head, or do you say today I'm
Sometimes.
gonna sit down and write something today?
Sometimes it will be something that I'm thinking about or learning about, or I read something in a newspaper or heard something on TV or saw a movie or was sitting in a restaurant and somebody said something and it's like, ooh, got a pen?
Yeah.
I got to write that down. It changes. So I have tried to write with the melody first.
Yeah.
I kind of think home. Actually, I think that I had the melody for that song before I had lyrics.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I start with the main idea and I write a chorus.
Got it.
And then I don't necessarily expect that it's not going to change and morph into something else because it frequently does.
Oh, good.
We talk often in the studio
Oh, yeah.
when we're working that this is still fluid.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, it's not in ink yet. You know,
Exactly. And a lot of times when we're in the studio, I'll record a song and we'll record the whole thing. And then I'll come back and poor Bruce, because I'll say, I think I'd like to hear this, what this would sound like with like a bossa beat.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool? And he just kind of rolls his eyes. It's like, okay, or the tempo, even when I first started recording, I would not spend enough time on figuring out what the tempo of the song was supposed to be,
Yeah.
because that's critical.
Well,
I- yeah.
and you see that, I think we all grew up, right? And we'd hear a song on the radio or we'd hear it on vinyl,
Right?
and oh, it's just a great song.
Yeah.
And you don't realize all the iterations that happened before that. And of course, now that we're in this age of content being everything's videotaped, everything, everything's taped, everything's recorded, everything's,
Right.
and even going back into these old things, like you watch the old, the conversations from like Hitsville, USA, right? They talk about some of these great Motown hits that came out. Some of them were flops when they came out,
Right.
and they got re-released with little changes to them,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and they became massively huge and successful.
Right.
And I think it's encouraging. That's why I like conversations like this, because I think for a lot of wannabe songwriters out there, they come into it thinking, I've got to have this great idea, I've got to have this hook, it's got to be right from the beginning, and if I can't figure it out, I'm no good.
Right.
And whereas in reality, it could take. I've known people that some of these songs can take years to get to their
absolutely.
final place. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had a guy in the studio one time. We were finishing an album. He flew in for 1 week to do a whole project, he was in California.
Right.
And so we're at the last song on the album. We've been working on it for hours and hours, and he's like, I'm going to cut this song. It's just not working. It's not working. We took a break. We came back. We dropped it a half a key and dropped it one click.
Right.
All of a sudden, it was like, it
Everything
fell right
changes. Yeah.
in, and it became my favorite song on his album. But it was that close to being cut.
Isn't it amazing how many other things are floating around out there that were this far away from greatness?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's where my mind goes. I think, and I'd love to hear your philosophies on this. I don't believe our ideas are necessarily our own. I don't think our ideas define who we are. I think all this sort of exists out there, in whatever you want to call it, in the universe, in the cosmos, whatever it is. And we're either just receptive and open to hearing it, feeling it, seeing it, or we're not. And so when these things are sort of dancing around out there and they come to you through song or through art or through some dance, some form of expression, I kind of feel like you're just receiving something that's already there, and it's your job to interpret it and sort of make something out of it. And how often do you just can't quite find exactly what you're looking for, and you can't quite put your finger on why?
Yeah. Right. I think that negativity is something I have to watch out for,
In
and
what
telling
way?
myself no, because I'll tell myself I don't have time. Right now, I'm kind of balancing a lot of things in my own personal life, and I don't have as much time as I kind of wish I had
Yeah.
to do things. And so I've been recently telling myself I need to just take little spurts, the little bits and pieces and snippets of time I have to work on things that I want to work on and to bring more joy into my life. Because I think when you are in an open-minded place, and when you're in a joyful place and a calm place,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much easier to download any kind of useful thing.
Yeah.
And I find that when I'm in a state of overwhelm,
Mm.
I don't even have the things, the ideas, or I'll shoot ideas down. So I think being negative, and I think plugging in too much to the outside world,
Yeah. All the noise.
all the
Yeah.
noise, the social media,
News,
the
everything.
news.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I think
Yeah.
to your point, I think it's really hard,
yeah,
and it's getting harder all the time. When we grew up, there was far less input. We had our town that we lived in.
Right.
We kind of knew what was going on in our town. We had
Yep.
3 stations on the television. We
And
didn't
you got
have
all your music from a record player or the radio. That was it.
That's
correct, and everything came from. And you shared it. You'd be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, Bruce, I got this new record. I'd come over to your
Exactly.
house and we listen to this. Oh, wow, that sounds really interesting." That's how you learned about everything, right?
Yeah.
So you had so much less noise in the air. And I think we all struggle with that. And I know for me, it's been a big metamorphosis the last few years of really slowing myself down and making myself available to literally see, hear, and experience the tiny little things around me that I really probably didn't notice before.
Right.
And as a result, it blew open my creative process. And it was something that existed in me and I didn't even know it existed. Because whenever I came across a problem in life or something that I couldn't quite figure out, whether it was like work related, I'd do what I call let it percolate. I'd go away from it and I just wouldn't try to figure it out anymore. And I would just take a walk or go for a run or whatever. And eventually the answer always came to me.
Exactly.
And I started to realize, the harder I try, the harder it is to sometimes find that. The more I don't try, I'm just in the shower and all of a sudden, oh, there's the answer. And I think it took me 50 years to figure out that maybe if I just slowed everything else down, there'd be more to receive. And that's kind of when I started to get into this idea and thought process of it's all out there.
Yeah.
I don't have to find it. I just have to see it, right?
The way I think about that is sort of gathering morsels, like you were talking about just being inspired by anything that you're watching or anything.
yeah.
So I have a cat named Hemi because she was the fastest kitten. We had some
Good
kittens.
name.
And so I named her Hemi. And last night we were watching TV and Hemi's just, doing the zoomy thing back and forth. And my wife said, "There's Hemi thundering." And I just thought about Hemi's thundering. Hemi's thundering in the night. And I'm like, I got to write this
Got
down.
a pen.
So somehow that's that's in the bank.
Yeah.
Right. And something might come up. And, this morning, waiting for you guys to come here, I picked up the guitar and I was just playing chords and just something that came and who knows what's going to come of that? Maybe nothing. Maybe that'll be Hemi's thundering in the night. But it's the like Scott says, you're just working the muscle. It doesn't have to be a home run. You're working the muscle. And, that's completely in line with what I've seen in you and what you've taught me, verbally and everything. So it's
And to your point, Lorna taught music for NSAI. She taught singer-songwriter
For
stuff
9 years.
for 9 years. And one time
Here.
she did a class, and I sat in. I didn't always sit in on them, but she came in and she handed everybody newspapers, and she said, "We're each going to write something out of something you read in the newspaper."
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
do you remember that?
I do.
that's great.
It was really a good exercise.
And I was affiliated with the Nashville Songwriters Association, NSAI, for 9 years. And I would every month we had a bunch of songwriters in the Charleston area, and we would meet at the downtown library, and we would play each other our songs, and we would learn more things. There were all sorts of lessons that NSAI provided. And so, and what y'all were saying about it doesn't, when you're trying to write something, instead of expecting that it's going to be a hit or whatever, if you can just say, oh, this is interesting, I want to pursue
an
this.
exercise.
Yeah, this is an exercise. I may love it, I may not love it. It's okay. That takes a lot of the pressure off.
It's like you got to do 100 no good songs to finally start getting
There
to
you
the
go.
ones that work. You
Well,
know?
there's
And even doing the no good songs is fun.
It's
It's
fun.
so much fun.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yep.
There's a really great expression that was taught to me that I've hung on to like for dear life because it really resonated, and that is losing attachment to outcome. And it doesn't mean not caring, because you still want to go. You want to do. When you go into whatever it is, writing a song, meeting someone new, a new job, whatever it is, you have an expectation of how you like it to turn out. Okay, but if it doesn't, I shouldn't say if. When it doesn't, typically we're disappointed or upset, or we get angry with ourselves. Oh, what did I do wrong here? Why didn't I get this right? And when I was taught that expression and the idea behind it, don't be attached to the outcome. It's okay if doesn't come out the way you wanted it to be, because maybe it went in a better direction, or maybe it's a stepping stone to something else.
That's
And
great.
that relieves that pressure for me right away. Music is a great example of that. You go on stage live and you have this, I want to be good and I want to be great and I want to really please people and I want there to be a big crowd and a lot of people having a good time. And sometimes it just doesn't happen, or you're having an off night, or you're struggling. And if you let that weigh on you, it gets worse and worse and worse, as opposed to, we're doing a beautiful thing up here. Let's not be attached to the outcome of what's happening. Let's be in the moment of what's happening. And then it's like now you're riding that wave.
Yeah.
And I think songwriting, and I've really seen this in Alan since I've met him, watching that growth of not being attached to outcome, of just sort of letting things roll the way they're going to roll, and finding where it leads you is really, to me, a very interesting way to approach it.
Yeah. I love the word interesting. I've been using that word. It's kind of like my go-to word. My daughter even made me for Christmas a pillow that says, well, isn't that interesting? Because, I mean, during the pandemic, for example, and you have the, I could have either just cringe and, just be scared all the time, or I could just sort of try to relax and say, well, isn't that interesting? Which kind of takes a little bit of the angst out of things.
Yeah.
In songwriting, there are very few people, in my humble opinion, that are going to become famous. I knew an awful lot of people that even moved to Nashville. I never moved there, but who did go all in and still had to realize it was a dream that wasn't going to happen, and go back home again and feel defeated. And so, especially after Pandora and Spotify, and one of the days that I decided probably wasn't in the cards for me at that time was, I had a good friend who called me from Nashville and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm out running errands." He said, "Well, go get in your car and sit down." And so he lost his publishing deal, because his publishing company went bankrupt.
And he had #1 hits.
Yeah,
I mean, this
he was
guy
on the radio. I mean, and he lost his deal. And my big thought that came to mind is, if he can't make this work, then who do I think I am to try to do this right now without moving? And I mean, I still love Nashville.
Yeah.
I feel like my tribe is there, because there were so many people that I met who were like me, which I don't always feel that everybody is like me.
But
in
the
that-
other point is, you can be successful at songwriting. There's a positive to this.
Oh, yeah.
In doing it different ways, like she's doing it in schools. And
Right. I figured out a way to make
Still-
money still and be a songwriter. It's like, yes.
but she still
Well, I think
writes.
too, especially, and this is something I really want to talk to you about, Bruce, in light of what you do, is we sometimes get our mind, again, it goes back to attachment to outcome. We get our mind on a path and think, this is the path I really need to follow. When really there are so many different other areas and directions you can go in. And we look at, we were talking a little bit earlier, and I was waxing poetic about, times changing, and there used to be days when we traded albums, and well, now we just pick up our phones and we can hear anything. And there's good and bad to everything, right? But the good part of it is that there's so many different ways to express, to create,
Yeah.
right? And I'd be really curious to hear a little bit of your perspective, because you're really coming at it too from an engineering perspective. You build amazing equipment. You're a real gearhead, right?
Yeah, and I like producing and working on recordings in the studio.
Yeah, and studio work, and that's really obviously changed tremendously in the last 30 years.
And to your point a minute ago, I have worked on songs where I thought I was going in the right direction with this thing, and I was having a great time with it. And then sat back and listened to the first version of it and thought, wait a minute, I went in the whole wrong direction here. I got to back it up. So it's always about what best tells the story. How, when it comes to rhythms and grooves and all that stuff, and fancy effects and things, it's all great if it fits the song and fits what you're trying to deliver with the song. But you can overproduce pretty easily.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there, I think, that does get a little too auto-tuned and a little too overproduced.
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you a little bit about too, is that the technology now is so amazing,
It is.
right? But sometimes I feel like there's something lost with that too.
I've had many people who spent a lot of money with home studios, and they're songwriters at first. And they get lost in the technology and realize that I can't be on what we call both sides of the glass. I can't be in the control room and be the artist at the same time.
Yeah.
So they'd bring me in their tracks and say, "Could you just make something of this?" Or they would just say, "Let's start over and record in the studio."
Yeah.
And then they're selling off their gear. So it doesn't work for some people, but
Yeah.
for some people that do have the little technology in their head and understand it, they can do it all themselves.
I have a cassette tape of Fred Norris that was engineered and produced by Bruce Roberts. So this is like, I can't imagine, 80s maybe? I don't know. It was long before me, and I know that, but I got that, and I used to listen to that, and it always amazed me how, a musician can also sometimes serve as a producer, or sometimes do a whole record playing all the instruments, because so I have GarageBand, and I've got the songwriting bug. So I'm doing all this stuff, and I can put on 7 guitar parts, and I can slow it down, so I can do like a lead guitar part, and then you can do all the stuff. But then you start realizing this is very one-dimensional. I need other musicians. I need someone who knows what they're talking. So I can see someone bringing their tracks and saying, this is just like, to us, it's just kind of like, like just monochrome. Can you add the color?
I've always preferred sound guys that had some music knowledge, because they kind of really know what to listen for. It's not just about what's coming out of the speakers. It's a little more musical than that. And so if they have a good sense of music, they can hear when something's not in tune right. But yeah, maybe I have sacrificed a little bit by being in 2 lanes. I could have developed one a little more, but it's kind of worked for me.
Yeah, I think I'm constantly. It's just because it's what I do. I'm always thinking about things, and I'm constantly thinking about the ability to do what people can do today, literally from their phone if they want to, without even a computer. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, phone's a computer, but you have people like Billie Eilish writes a multi-platinum song in a 1-bedroom studio apartment with her brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On a computer, right?
Yeah.
amazing album.
Yep.
And so the barrier to entry for someone who's creative is there now. You don't need to have a huge record contract and tons of money for equipment and studios, and you can do that. On the flip side, for me, there's some magic lost when you hear, like if you listen to the old Motown stuff, I call it hearing the air. You can hear the air, right? You can feel, again, we'll go back to the woo-woo side of me that Alan knows well. I believe, rooms have energy. Inanimate objects hold energy. They hold memories just like we do. Certain room, Muscle Shoals, some Sound City, some of those studios, for whatever reason, there was a sound that came out of them, and you can almost hear the life when you hear the recordings.
Yeah.
And I missed that in the digital stuff. I don't feel that same thing, but they're technically fantastic.
Right.
Right? And so part of me, the nostalgic part of me, misses that sound of the air, the feeling of the energy. But I also respect the fact that it's opened it up for so many new ideas. And so I'd be curious your thoughts about some of that.
I recently saw an interview with one of the guys that played with Steely Dan, and he said that back in the day when they recorded, there were no click tracks. No one had a click. The drummer was that good.
Yeah.
And they purposely allowed for tempos to speed up a little bit, like in the choruses. And,
Yes.
they let it breathe, as you said.
There was no quantizing, or if there
No.
was, it wasn't. And the other skill that I guess is lost, except for people like you, is there used to be certain engineers that we got to get that guy because he is the punch-in master.
Yeah.
Right, with the analog machines, and they
Yeah.
just know where to punch, and just remember Arnold O'Neill?
Yeah.
Punch-in master.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember him.
Yep.
Well, and just you hear the stories about you could spend 2 days just miking a drum kit,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
right, to get the sound that you wanted.
Yeah.
And now you just run some
find a
plugins.
sample.
And,
Right,
yeah,
you
Yeah.
just
you sample something, and
Yeah.
and that's kind of for me what one of the allures to live music always was. I used to call it the danger of live music. I still call it that. You don't never know what's going to happen. There's the danger factor, and that's really, to me, kind of cool and fun.
Yeah.
But even now, when you go to these really highly produced, amazing live shows, I kind of feel like the danger factor's even gone because so much of it is being, again, run through modelers and run through,
Right.
and
Or tracks.
Yeah,
tracks
there's
and
tracks
stuff.
that you're listening for, and it's even counting. So
Yeah.
like 1, 2, ready, go. I mean,
Absolutely,
it's
yeah.
all in here before you venture to
Yeah.
sing a sound.
And I can remember, it was like maybe 3 or 4 years ago, ZZ Top was playing here at the stadium. And I was really excited. I love ZZ Top. And I went, and it was perfect. Note for note, perfect. And I was bored out of my mind. Because I could have just been listening to I'll date myself, listening to a CD.
Right.
And they were great. Not taking anything away from them. But I didn't feel the danger.
Yeah.
Every solo was exactly the way it's played. Every note was it was just too perfect for me. And
When you go see Keb Mo or a Bonnie Raitt or somebody,
Yeah.
that is live
Correct.
music. And
Yes.
it's done right, Boy.
And I miss that. I miss that in recording. I miss it in live music. But I risk sounding like the get off my lawn guy, right? The old man who's going, when I was a kid, this is the way we
Back
did
in
it.
the day.
We banged pots together and we liked the scratchy sound of the needle on the vinyl, right?
We've had sessions where we ran in and got a pot out of the kitchen.
Any
and
number of
you use whatever you can find
Yeah.
to
Well,
make it fit.
And I think that's such a cool thing, right? I forget what song it was, but I remember Keith Richards telling the story of, because he used to record on you remember the old cassette players we plug
Yeah.
into, right? And he recorded this song, and then he mic'd that through his amp to distort it out. And that's what they record. His demo is what got on the live recording. Wow. And it was sort of a way to take an acoustic guitar and add some distortion to it because he just mic'd it off a little crappy cassette recorder with the 2 record buttons.
Yeah.
And those interesting ways of coming up with sound, I think are really, again, it's part of the the life of the music, the
Yeah.
energy of
And
the
it's
music.
fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. We've recorded in the bathroom before because of
The
the
great sounds,
reverberation.
yeah.
There's all that great reverb there. So, and
Yeah.
we are always picking up little kids' musical instruments like little xylophones from Cracker Barrel and
Yep.
penny whistles and things like that, just for a little. Because sometimes you just need a little tinkly sound. If
Yeah.
you got a lot of bass, you want to put some highs in there. So
Balance it out. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So there's
So from
yeah.
my perspective, what I've noticed as you're telling your story, you're telling, talking about your influences, and you've been to Nashville, that you had certain degree of success, and it didn't work out, and everything. But it's dawning on me that I don't think you guys see yourself as the leaders in the music community in the Low Country that you are.
Well, I think there's too many people that fit in that
I
category.
think there's so many talented people. Oh my gosh, in
goodness.
Charleston.
Yeah,
I mean,
and you're just-
so many.
Many.
You're one of the I mean, you guys are, and it doesn't mean that other people aren't, but you are foundational. Certainly for me.
Oh, geez.
For me, it was a godsend that we even met. And I can go down that road and tell you.
I want to go down that road. Yeah, that's one
at
of
some
my.
point. Do you want to hit it?
I do. I want to hear
Well,
about how
she knocked on my door.
I did.
Okay, the backstory of that.
Basically, yeah.
The backstory of that is that I was working at a radio station, and one of the salesmen there, and this would have been 1993. He said, "I've got a band and I want to do a demo, blah blah blah." And I kept putting him off because I was busy or whatever. And then about December of '93, he came to me and said, "We've just got a new girl singer in our band. I really want to do this demo." It was a jazz band. And I said, "Okay, how about the last weekend of January?" So that would have been January '94. We decided that that's the day we would record his demo. And so everybody was showing up. I was setting things up. I had no idea who was coming and going, and I had not met her. So I've got a mic set up for her and all this stuff. And I didn't realize it until I hit record and we started going. I mean, I was just starstruck, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I know that feeling.
Well, you have a voice like an angel, which we're going to get to when we record later. But yeah,
And so I made sure she got the first copy of the demos, and
I ate all of his Girl Scout chocolate mint cookies.
That's love.
That was,
That's-
I mean,
30
love.
years
and
ago.
He still ask me for a date. I don't know.
I'm going to say if you're willing to share all your cookies like that, then
Yeah, that was-
you're smitten at that point.
I knew.
I was smitten.
Yeah. I knew.
And,
I
you know,
was,
we've both been through previous lives, and we were at a place, I think, where we kind of knew what we didn't want, maybe in our life, but we weren't seeking. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it was a magical moment.
And so that was 30 years ago.
Yeah,
And then how long till you guys actually got married?
we dated for a little over a year.
Yeah.
And we both had kids, and we had to figure out how we're going to blend this family and have the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
You know, and we had challenges along the way, but who doesn't? You know?
Right.
So if I'm doing my math correctly, you're coming up on a 30th anniversary then.
we
Yep.
are.
When is it? What's the date?
April
April 8th.
8th.
April 8th. All right.
What a team.
I'm going to remember.
I remember half. She remembers half.
I'm divorced. I was married for 25 years to a wonderful woman, and neither of us could remember the date of our wedding. It's a long story I won't get into here, but it was sort of an ad hoc wedding that we did as a surprise party for all of our friends. So none of them even knew it was a wedding when they showed up. And years later, we went to have our rings engraved with the date, and we couldn't remember the date. And at first I thought, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble here. I can't remember my anniversary date. She's going to be really angry with me. But then as we got talking about it, she fessed up the same thing. Wow. And so we literally had to go back in the calendar because we remembered the day of the week that it was, and we knew the year. So we had to go back and see, was it, because we knew it was May 6th or the 8th or something like that. So we had to map it to the day of the week and go, oh, okay, I think it was the 8th. It's the 8th. It was the 8th that year, a Friday. So that's how we had to figure out our wedding.
Another interesting point was that after we started dating, we realized there was I think it was about 15 people that we both knew that were musicians or worked in music. We both knew them, but we still didn't know each other.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
it
wow.
wasn't time.
It wasn't
Yeah,
our
yeah.
It
time.
wasn't time for our
Yeah.
lives to cross.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that's, I believe in synchronicity.
Oh, I'm a
Yeah,
huge believer in that
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
Very much. That when the time is right, then things can happen that can't happen until the time is right.
Yeah, I would, just kind of underscoring what you're saying. That's what it was like for me in Groove Kitty, because by the time I'd had enough.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing in church sometimes, but most of the time I just
Yeah.
laying. And I told my wife, I think I've retired. I'm fine with it. I've gotten to do a lot of stuff, and it's been fun. I've made all these friends, and it's been. So I get this email, and the name first I see it's a 617 area code, which is Boston, which is like all my relatives are from Boston. So I'm thinking, well, at least this guy I will understand where he's coming from,
Yeah.
And then the name of the band was Groove Kitty, and
What a name.
I could be, I am the cat grandpa, right? So my wife said, "Well, what are you gonna do?" I was like, "What do you, Groove Kitty? I have to go." And the thing about Groove Kitty, as we've kind of just gone along, members have left. We've gotten other members. Somehow, we have had the right chemistry.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if
That's what it is.
we blow it, and if someone makes a mistake so badly that we have to stop,
That
we
would
just
be me.
or we just laugh. You get laughed at. You get laughed at, and we just go. We don't worry about it. It's fun. We're having fun. We're having a blast. That's what's really happening.
Absolutely.
So and that's chemistry, and you guys have a similar chemistry, and that's always been from someone who has eaten breakfast with you many Sunday mornings, right, in the green room.
Yeah.
Right.
And talked. You guys are very complimentary of one another. You're a team. You're one, and that's always because as people talk about Bruce and Lorna. Sometimes they'll talk about Bruce. Oftentimes they'll talk about Lorna, but most of the time it's Bruce and Lorna.
Right. Yeah, we kind of go together.
Yeah.
And speaking
well.
of Groove Kitty, she was in a band once called Cat's Cradle. See, there's a
my
connection.
very first band was called Cat's Cradle.
Mm-hmm.
It's Kismet.
Wow. See there?
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a kitty theme going on here.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, so 30 years together.
Yeah.
Let me spin off into the world of relationships here. I'd like you each to tell me one thing about the other that you'd like the rest of the world to know. So, Bruce, tell me something about Lorna that you think everybody should know, something that you appreciate, love about her, respect, whatever it might be.
She's the most positive person I think I've ever known in my life.
Huh.
She always has the glass half full, if not 3/4 of the way. And so, and she sees the best in people.
Mm.
And sometimes I'll not see that, but and then many times she's taught me that take a beat here before you respond to something, because sometimes if you think about something a minute, it's not as bad as you thought it was at first.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've learned a lot from her.
That's beautiful.
Bruce is one of the kindest people you're going to ever meet on the planet, and he's humble, and he's positive, and he always he's very forgiving. He has a lot of grace about him, and he can calm me down, I think, more than I tend to be lots of energy a lot of times, and so he can help me kind of calm down and but kind. I think that's probably the first word that pops in my mind. He's just a very good person. Just layers
enough.
of good.
I'll buy your lunch.
You're preaching to the choir, sister.
I know.
Yeah,
See?
Big fan.
Well, I knew kind had to obviously be a prerequisite because when Alan said you need to meet these two people years ago, then I knew that they have to be good people because Alan doesn't mess around. Alan surrounds himself with good people, so that's why I'm
Well,
near
it's
him.
because he is one.
Yeah.
Too kind.
And I'll have to say, for any young people starting in music, getting involved in churches is great.
Yeah,
That is a great place to learn and learn how to work together. And I always like surrounding myself with people that were better players than me.
Oh yeah.
It just really kind of makes you pay attention. I had one guy, I won't mention his name. I was at Seacoast playing, by the way, and I had to do the intro on a guitar to the song, and I was kind of not really in it, but I was playing it, and he leaned over and sternly looked me in the eye and said, "You better play this thing like you mean it." And I was like, "What?" And, the way he said it, I was like, "Yeah, I'm really not doing it like I am in it."
yeah.
And so, but I learned a lot because I associated with better players than me. And I played with Ted McKee and the Call Mama Band, and I always liked being around. Sometimes I felt like I wasn't quite to their level, but hey,
Well, I think that's
I learned.
that's a real important thing. I think in anything
yeah,
is that again, I've always had a philosophy personally. If it makes me uncomfortable to do it, I should probably do it.
yeah, I think you're right.
And it forces me to do things that ultimately make me better, and I'm often terrified when I go to do them.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to do similar. There's a lot of different people that hold studio jams around here, and they're all really great musicians, far better than I am. And I show up to as many as possible. And I go and I feel inferior, and I come out feeling great. And even though if I make mistakes going through, it makes me a better person in the long run. And I think there's a lot to be said for that in life. And then ironically, about maybe 6 months ago, I was listening to a podcast. I don't know if you know who Andrew Huberman is. He's a neuroscientist and really geeky stuff, but I really like him. And he was talking about some study that was being done on how they're measuring the response in the brain when people did things that made them uncomfortable. And it stimulated the same parts of the brain that were sort of relegated to being open-minded and thinking of being able to accept new ideas, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a muscle that if we work, it's like anything, if we work it a lot, we do become more open. And I thought open-minded. And it was really interesting because I've always been extremely interested in hearing views that are different from mine. They fascinate me. Even if I don't agree with them, I want to hear them. I want to open my mind up more. And I sort of thought those two correlations were really an interesting one because at the same token, I always want to dive headfirst into stuff I'm not comfortable doing it. And I hate every second.
Right?
I was like, why did I do this? Why did I agree to this? And then afterwards, I feel so much better having done it. So it's a really interesting point that you bring up. And I think one that if we could encourage all musicians,
Exactly.
because I think there's this fear too, people are going to laugh. Kristen's a perfect example.
Oh yeah.
Beautiful.
Good. Yeah.
So beautiful.
When she came to the band the first time, she told me the story. She'll kill me for telling this, but
He's not here.
She's not here, so I'll pay later. She stood at the front door and was afraid to knock because she was afraid they're all going to be great musicians, and I'm just she's an amazing musician, classically trained violinist.
Wow.
But was kind of new on guitar, right? Had been playing for a few years. Has an amazing teacher, Chris Dodson. I'm a big fanboy of Chris. Chris, I love you, buddy.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yes, he is a good guy.
And we'll have him in here as well for sure.
Good.
So she was uncomfortable, right? And she put herself out there, and she told me the story quite some time later, maybe a year or 18 months later, and said, I almost walked away, and I'm so glad I didn't. Thank you so much for making an environment where I could feel comfortable. And she's a perfect example of putting herself in an uncomfortable position to the point now where she's
Running
literally
the band. Running the band, right?
Yeah, excuse my French. She's a badass guitar player,
Yeah.
a great vocalist.
She is.
People come to see her specifically in the band. I'm just a funky looking guy in the middle of these two great girls. And I'm so happy and amazed at her progress because she wasn't afraid to put herself
Right.
in a place where she was uncomfortable. And if more people could realize that as musicians, generally speaking, there are bad apples everywhere.
Yep.
But generally speaking, I've found musicians don't care
Right.
if you're good or bad.
Yeah.
They care if you have passion and you want to be there and you want to learn.
Right.
Then they open right up. And I've made more friends in the musical community because of that sort of attitude
Yeah.
of being to expose yourself, be vulnerable. Because back to the original conversation, it's kind of like the dream where you wake up, you have to go to give a speech out in front of the class and you realize you forgot to put your clothes on. You really feel vulnerable when
Sure.
you're playing music with other people. And when you realize it's okay, they all accept me
Oh,
for
yeah.
who I am.
And musicians love to be around other people who love music.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so, and there's such a great bunch of musicians in Charleston.
There really
I think I
is.
probably
Amazing
already said that
community here.
already, but it bears repeating. They're wonderful. I mean, and they're open and
We've had many shows where we've had more musicians in the audience than
Right.
other people.
yeah,
They're so supportive, and we do the
Definitely.
same. I mean, we're out at shows all the time for other people, and it really does your heart good
yes,
when you look out and you see all these people out there to support you. I recently started doing solo shows for the first time, again, because I wanted to be uncomfortable.
Right.
I've never performed solo before.
Yep.
I was scared to death. And the first show I did, 10, 11 other musicians were all there just to support me,
Awesome.
And it really made me feel good to think,
Yeah.
okay, these guys and gals have my back. No matter what happens, I'm part of this community. They're here to support me. And I love that about this area. It's a
And,
really
in the studio too, when we're on a project and we're like, let's bring in so and so for this part, Dale Baker, like for guitar or something. And boy, they come in and they bring in a whole different mindset on a. You're thinking this is just a little solo, and they're bringing something in it that's like, wow, I never would have gone that way.
Yeah.
So again, working with other musicians,
yeah.
whether it's playing out or in a studio environment,
yeah, collaboration.
really fun.
It's an
Well,
awesome
it goes
thing.
back to that idea we talked about earlier of connectivity.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is part of the allure. The allure of music is that connecting with other people
Yes.
and sharing something. You're making noise together,
Absolutely.
right? And sometimes the noise is really bad, and
Yep.
sometimes the noise is really good, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're doing something together, and there's kind of a spiritual bonding for me
Absolutely.
when that happens.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, musicians are my favorite people.
Yeah, and one thing that I've found, and it might be just because I'm older, I've never liked playing live, but I like playing with Groove Kitty enough so that I'm looking forward to gigs again. But the thing that has been so helpful to me is just we're talking about playing with other musicians, just the grace, and if you're in a band where people are good at accepting new ideas. One time, Kristen showed up with a ukulele. We don't play ukulele songs, but she made it work.
Oh,
And
now.
and nobody said, "Well, wait, what do we do?" Everybody was like, "Oh, look at that. Yeah, okay, we're going to do that now. Good." And so that's everybody's got an idea.
Yeah.
Ideas are welcome, just like you said. Ideas
absolutely.
are
Creative
welcome.
safe space.
Yeah, and I don't think we've actually used that term, but it very much is that. And it's there are a lot of things that I feel like God's got His hand on Groove Kitty, because there are just so many things that are just me being in this band and everything, and we've just had so many things going right. And so Scott is doing Groove Kitty. He's doing this. This podcast is actually part of Scott's vision of making a Charleston music community.
Great.
and connecting people. So that's what we're doing here. We want to know about you. We want other people to know about you. Obviously, I want other people to know about you, and we want them to know your music too, because this is all part of that vision.
That's
all part of
wonderful.
mixing with musicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
And I have to say here, Groove Kitty, y'all are fun.
That's a fun
Y'all are
band.
so much fun to go and watch. I mean, there's just, no matter who you are looking at, there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
You know, Scott's over there, he's like jumping up and down or going in the audience and all the stuff. And you're like doing these amazing bass licks and runs and,
And you know,
things.
a lot of
and-
bands are lucky to have
vocals.
one good singer. I mean, you guys have
Oh,
got.
yeah. Y'all got
We're
all
so
kinds
blessed.
of good.
I'm
Yeah,
telling
you
you,
are.
we're
What'd he
so
say?
blessed.
What'd he say? We're
Yeah.
so blessed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've found the right people, and
Yeah.
we love each other. I don't think we've ever once had an argument as a band. Have we ever?
Well,
Even-
that wouldn't be, it just wouldn't feel, that's not,
No.
it's like,
But you're adults. We can talk this out.
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
just it's open floor for everything,
That's
and
wonderful.
everyone has a vote, and we all root for each other, and
you know how
Like a family.
it really is.
Yeah.
in the band, it's always like, what was the last thing the drummer said before he got fired? Is like, hey guys, I have a song, or something like that. Well, in our band, our drummer is the guy with the producer's ear.
Oh yeah.
And he's a lot like Clay Stuckey, in that Clay Stuckey, even as a drum, when he's playing drums, he's thinking about the big picture.
Yep.
Yeah.
He can tie everything everything together
Yeah.
from the drummer's throne, which is just. I mean, the first time I saw him do that, my jaw
yeah.
was on the floor. But that's
good.
when you've got the drummer that has that, and that's like if we weren't mixing with all these musicians, we wouldn't have come up with Steve, and Kristen and that sort of thing. So
Yeah, all of them. All of them.
Synchronistic.
yeah.
Synchronicity. Exactly. Well, you guys are amazing. It's been a real
Well, thank you.
pleasure and
Thank
honor
you.
talking to you. Is there anything that you'd like to promote? Do you have any social media handles you want to get out there for people?
Not particularly.
We're working on our webpage,
Yeah, I'm working on a
lornaroberts.com.
web page,
I'm sorry.
and
What's the domain?
It's lornaroberts.com.
LornaRoberts.com. Okay.
I have a YouTube channel, Lorna Roberts.
Perfect.
I need to edit and take things down and put things up, and
The struggle is real.
yes, the struggle.
Of course, there's the idea that I had about the Lorna Roberts T-shirts, right? When you said
Oh
you'd been
yeah,
hacked.
I'm apparently on Facebook. I
This
seem
happens
to
all the
be
time. Yeah.
Everybody's being
selling
hacked.
T-shirts, and I keep posting. It's like, no, it's not me. I don't make any money. Don't do this.
But now I want a
Crazy.
T-shirt.
I don't know if anybody's ever received a T-shirt. I think it's just a
some
hack.
people have.
Oh, have they?
actually. Yeah.
Oh, that's
but
so funny.
Yeah, it's a crazy world.
My friend Scott Morrison from the Novatones has been hacked a couple of times that same way, and so
Yep.
he's constantly, don't buy my T-shirt. Don't buy my T-shirt. Poor guy. He's a good guy.
Man,
All right. Well, how do you guys feel about going up in the studio and making a little bit of music?
That'd
sounds
be
fun to
so
me.
much fun.
All right.
Oh,
Let's
yeah.
go have some fun.
All right. Winds of change have blown my world apart, left me broken hearted. I'm so blue. It feels so strange. Guess I'll be starting over. I don't quite know what to do. Living on dreams and the kindness of strangers. My old life is gone with the wind. My heart believes that I am still in danger, and I'm longing sheltered from the storms that came my way. Now I know home is a state of mind. I sure hope I find it again someday. Living on dreams and the kindness of strangers. My old life is gone with the wind. My heart believes that I am still in danger, and I'm longing to be home again. My mind goes back to that place I love, to the place where I belong. Living on dreams in the kindness of strangers. My old life is gone with the wind. My heart believes that I am still in danger, and I'm longing to be home again. I'm longing to be home again. I wish I could go home again.
Thank you for watching Open Mic with Groove Kitty. We hope you enjoyed the episode. This podcast is for you, so please make sure you share, like, follow, and subscribe. When you do, it increases our exposure on every platform. This, in turn, helps to promote our guests. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. Thanks again. We'll see you all again soon.